I just would encourage anyone listening to this who is like wanting to do this work in any way, whether it's with young people, groups, individuals, whatever, like it's never going to be perfect. It's never perfect in teaching. There's always a million and one things you can do. You could do more and more and more and more. It's never perfect.
Yeah, just go for it. Like if you've wanted to do it, just go for it. And also just go for it. Like just contact a school and say, can I come in? And just, maybe don't charge, just because all of that is really brilliant experience and will enable you to grow, or will enable you to decide if that's what you want to do or not. Because we don't know what we want to do till we know what we don't want to. You don't know what you don't want to do till you try it out.
Welcome to the Cycle Coach Show. Empowering conversations on menstrual cycle coaching. We're your hosts, Claire Baker and Lauren Olivia Hughes. Hi everyone, you've got Claire here introing today's episode, and gosh, this is a good one. I've often wondered what my teenage years might have looked like if I'd have had menstrual cycle awareness back then. I remember being around 13 or 14, 15 and watching my body change in ways that felt so different from my male friends' experiences. The mood swings, the awful hormonal acne. What I can guess now in hindsight was probably PMS symptoms, the way that my energy would shift throughout the month, and then, of course, going on the contraceptive pill. My periods were always pretty regular throughout my teenage years, and I used to track my upcoming periods with a star on my calendar, which is really cute. But that was about as far as my understanding went. My friends and I just never really talked about periods openly, honestly. It was all very hush-hush. And I'll never forget a friend in the school toilets one afternoon asking if anyone had a little white mouse, which was her code word for a tampon. And that pretty much sums up how we all approach menstruation, honestly. And so in my 12 years of coaching, I've primarily worked with grown women who are discovering menstrual cycle awareness for the first time, and often feeling that sense of, why didn't anyone tell me this before? But today's conversation has me fascinated by a different question, which is what happens when we give this knowledge to young people from the very beginning. So in this episode, you're going to hear Lauren speaking with Hannah from Womb Wisdom and Beth from Bloom and Belong, two of our incredible alumni who are pioneering menstrual cycle work with children and teenagers as menstrual educators. They're running period and puberty workshops in schools, training menstrual ambassadors, and facilitating first moon circles. Beth has also recently completed her dissertation at Oxford University in periods and pedagogy, which was a research project exploring the impact of the menstrual cycle on teachers' emotions and the effectiveness of coaching as an intervention, which is just incredible. I was particularly struck by the way that both Hannah and Beth share how they're honestly wrestling with complex questions like, how does a parent support their daughter to honor her bleeding body while also honoring her commitments like school or netball? How do we teach both girls and boys about periods in age-appropriate ways? And what does it look like to normalize menstruation in educational settings? So maybe this is an area that you are personally interested in, how to bring menstrual cycle awareness to young people. And this conversation really offers a glimpse into what's possible when we start these conversations early at such a formative time in these young people's lives. So enjoy listening, and please do leave us a review or come and share a comment on Instagram to let us know how you find this episode. Before we dive into today's episode, I just want to let you know that enrollments for Cycle Coach School for 2025 are now officially open. This will be our 7th year running the training, and it's for anyone feeling the call to guide, educate, or support others through menstrual cycle awareness. The course begins on Tuesday, June the 24th of 2025, and spots always fill quickly. Since 2019, we've trained over 200 facilitators in 27 countries. And so if you would like to join us, you can see the full syllabus and apply at cyclecoachtraining.com
We would love to have you in the circle this year. Welcome to Hannah and Beth. Thank you so much for joining us today on the Cycle Coach Show.
Thank you for having us.
Very excited to get started, and we love to open each episode with a cycle check-in. So perhaps to start us, I'll invite Hannah to share her cycle check-in.
Thank you. And thanks for having me. I'm really excited about this conversation. I am cycle day 14 today and feeling quite good, actually, full of the joys of spring, but also trying to kind of hold the tension between not getting too carried away on that kind of ovulatory energy. I haven't ovulated yet, but I think in a couple of days I will. So yeah, I feel kind of aligned and like quite grounded today, actually. Whereas sometimes I can get a bit too around this time, but yeah, I feel quite good. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And Beth, where are you in your cycle?
So I'm cycle day 1, which is hilarious. So we all know who is going to be the most articulate today. Yeah, cycle day 1, which often can be like quite mixed for me. I always feel a sense of relief. The last few days, it's like it's been building up. And so I feel a sense of relief. I do feel quite grounded, but I am definitely like a little bit scatty on day 1. So quite scrambled thoughts and not particularly articulate. Hey ho, we'll do our best.
Hannah will keep us together because I don't even know it's cycle day anymore because I'm 31 weeks pregnant in a few days. So it depends on the day, but sometimes my brain is with me and other days it's starting to have those like little holes in it of just like the thread of thought disappears mid-sentence. So hopefully we could just, hold space for each other with where we are, and it'll be a wonderful conversation.
How are you feeling, Lauren, at 31 weeks or 30 weeks?
Yeah, 31 weeks. I'm feeling good. It's feeling, well, I know you can relate with the ADHD element of it's a very long project, and I feel like I've been ready to like kind of move on to the next thing a few times. And there's also just like a part of me that keeps forgetting a little bit that I am doing this. So it's been a test in patience, I would say, and slowness of just as much as I want to just hyper focus and get everything organized and have it all be done. Yeah, obviously parenthood, it's never done. It's going to be nonstop. So I've been feeling good though. There is so much I want to chat with you both about. And as I kind of said before we hit record, I want this just to be like a conversation because I know you two are in each other's sphere of influences and you do speak on and off. So maybe to start, so we can begin with you, Beth, of just how did you or where did you start this menstrual cycle awareness? Where did this seed get planted in your story?
So there was a really specific like light bulb moment. So I went to a conference and I'd had my first daughter, so she's 9 now. So it was in 2016 or early 2017. And a friend of mine was coming up to London. I was living in London and had booked these tickets for this. It's like a kind of women's wellness type conference. And she'd asked me if I wanted to go. And I went as her guest. I hadn't kind of looked at what was on the agenda or, it was just going to be nice to hang out with my friend for the day. And Claire Baker was talking at that. And she did I think at the time, like her signature kind of menstrual cycle awareness talk. And it just, out of everything, I couldn't tell you anything else that happened that day, but that really resonated with me because I'd never, ever, I'd always seen my period as an never tracked my cycle or been, aware of like how I felt physically and emotionally or even given it any consideration at all. I'd never connected to my body really, like my mind and my body in any way. I'd spent my whole life up until then really just intellectualizing everything. And I could talk about how I felt, until the cows come home, but I couldn't necessarily actually feel it. So that was so interesting for me. And I, kind of like started to look into my own menstrual cycle. And then I decided to do Claire's menstrual cycle coach school program, which was incredible. And I think because my background's in education, I always kind of knew that I would do the work in some way with young people. That's always kind of been, I would sort of marry my two careers, I guess, in a way. I just never could have envisaged the extent to which they would merge. That's been just really incredible, actually, that part of the journey. So then after that, the natural progression was kind of to go on to do Charlotte Onto's first moon circle facilitator training. And then that was the birth really of Bloom and Belong, the CIC, which is my social enterprise that I run.
Yeah. And I love that interwovenness between Claire's work and Charlotte's. I feel like that's a common thread for quite a few people coming through the school. And I think it's so wonderful how you tied in with your background in teaching. Before I feel like there's already like a million questions I want to ask you. Let's just tie in Hannah. And Hannah, where was that seed first planted for you in menstrual cycle awareness?
Yeah, I loved hearing more about your beginnings as well, Beth. And mine was similar in terms of a light bulb moment, but it was reading about the seasons. I remember the moment and where I was when I actually read about it in Maisie Hill's Period Power. And I just remembered just thinking, what? Like, how have I been in this body for this long? I was like late 30s and had 2 kids. And was just like, this is absolutely crazy. And so then just started sharing the book and talking about periods to whoever would listen, sharing the book with all my girlfriends. Yeah. And then I'd like, my background is that I'm a social worker and like children's social worker, and had moved into training and consultancy, and was just feeling a bit stagnant in that. And my friend sent me the cycle coach training, and I was like, well, that seems obvious that I would do that. I had no clue about what was going to happen afterwards, but I just was like, I wanted to work with people more again. I knew that. And yeah, just kind of I just wanted to shout about it and just be involved in that work. And the more I learned and the more I kind of understood, like Beth was saying, it kind of, it all became technicolor. I was just so determined, as I think lots of people do when they come to this work. They just go, what? How do we not know this? And then want to just shout about it all the time. So that was the kind of vibe I was going for. But I think I thought that I would just end up doing coaching. And I realize I'm slightly going into the kind of the what happened next bit. But in a whole journey of working out, like tying the threads up, in terms of actually realizing that there were more threads that I'd kind of planted like before I'd started learning about menstrual cycle awareness, and then going, okay. And it's taken me a couple of years to kind of piece the bits together. And now when I look at what I'm doing, I'm like, it's so obvious that you would do like menstrual education and stuff with children and young people. But when I finished cycle coach school, I was like, I didn't even think of that, which sounds so stupid. When I think back, I just thought, no, I'm going to do cycle coaching, which I still do some, I do bits of that as well. But so I think, and I've just deepened that as I've gone on and on. I think I'm just about to finish Red School's MLP, which has just been like still integrating all of that. But so I just just feel really privileged to have had the opportunity to start walking down this path and to be to be able to make a living from doing bits of social worky stuff and menstrual cycle work as well. I just still have to pinch myself occasionally and go, how did that happen?
It's so interesting to hear how you speak that it wasn't an obvious choice for you, because I feel like my next question was like, I find sometimes the graduates of the school will come out and it's almost like overwhelming with like all the avenues you can take. There are so many different paths. And sometimes there is that panic of like, I want to do it all. And yet for the two of you, from the outside at least, it seems like so apparent with like the backgrounds that you have, that of course you work primarily with young girls and children in this educational format. But how long did it take you to kind of realize like, oh, this is the connection? And Beth, maybe it was the same for you as well.
It's so funny that you asked that. And I'm laughing because it was only a couple of months ago that my supervisor said to me, you know that you're a menstrual educator. And I was like, what? She was like, but Hannah, you're doing blah, 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 blah. And I was like, oh, yeah. And it's so funny, isn't it? Because I'd just kind of been busy like following the threads or like following the breadcrumbs. And I think I had this identity as a cycle coach. I thought that that's what I was doing. I was a social worker and a cycle coach. Even though I was doing bits of menstrual education, I think I just hadn't fully embodied that identity. And so when she said you're an educator, I was like, I'm not an educator. So ridiculous. And I'm still kind of integrating that. But I think that that's just an ongoing process as you kind of try on these new versions of yourself. So I was really interested to hear you say, Beth, that you'd always known that that was what you wanted to do, because that wasn't my experience. But it's so interesting, isn't it?
Well, it became apparent through cycle coach, but I wouldn't say going into that was immediately obvious. It kind of that happened through the evolution of the course. But actually, so the first few months of Cycle Coach, there were like other people on the course, and I'm sure as it's grown and the kind of intake has become much more diverse in terms of what everybody does and brings to it. That there are more and more people from an education background, but there were a couple, but it wasn't. It was predominantly kind of people that either had a coaching background and wanted to add menstruality kind of element to that, or people who just had this incredible kind of portfolio of like qualifications and knowledge bases and skill sets and accreditations, and did really kind of holistic work with people. And I felt really, really intimidated by that for the first few months. And I had such significant imposter syndrome. And I remember chatting to Claire, and I remember that we had listening partners, and I was chatting to my husband and things after the sessions, and I'd kind of say like it just feels so obvious for other people, and they're so credible with this, and there's like this real kind of seamless integration of this work. And I teach business studies. I teach business studies, BTEC and A-level. Like, what on earth am I? And at the time I was training teachers, so I wasn't even in the classroom. So I was like, how on earth am I going to thread this through? And I felt really I definitely remember a real wobbly, couple of months of thinking, oh, I don't know that I'm going to do anything with this. But then it was a shorter time span to you, Hannah. Now I really know that that's what I do. But I definitely, towards then the end of the course, I met Charlotte and I really connected, and I was like, okay, here's the niche, this is what it's going to be. But again, it's like, well, was that not obvious? But no, not straight away.
It's so funny, isn't it? Yeah.
Always a moment of hindsight of like, of course. And it reminds me, I think it was last week or something. I think like projector in human design and just like feeling a bit wobbly in pregnancy. I was like on ChatGPT and I was like, if I show you my website, like, what do you think I do? I'm like, is it clear what I do? And it like gave a perfect description. I was like, okay, glad someone else can it's a computer, but I'm like, glad it's like obvious to other people, because sometimes it's just like, it's hard to see yourself, especially when you are in a course or in any program really, where there are people who seem so focused or seem so like further along on their path. Then it's just like, wait, should I be that like, I don't know, together already? And it's like, of course not. We'll all get there.
And I remember at the beginning of Cycle Coach, Claire like naming that, and that was really powerful, saying, that you're exactly where you need to be. You're kind of not behind, and that was reassuring. But yeah, it is when you enter a space like that, and there's loads of people from different backgrounds, that you kind of think, where do I fit into this?
It's so interesting what you were saying about like is it clear what I do? And Hannah, because I know we really connected on Cycle Coach, and we've kind of had like little semi-regular catch-ups and things since then, and chatted, and there's a lot of kind of synergy between what we do and shared interests and passions and things. But what I find like running my own social enterprise is it's just constantly evolving. It's constantly coming back to that question, like what's at the heart of what I do, which is empowerment and belonging. They're the two kind of key things for me that I feel most passionate about. But is this clear? Hang on, I've got to add this page to the website. Is that now? It's like this. Just you're constantly trying to adapt. What I've often found an interesting reflection is that I don't know that I could do this work, because you do have to hold like a lot of trust in yourself. I have a lot of trust in kind of the universe that what will be, it will emerge, it will evolve. I don't have to know all the answers. I have to have that faith and trust my instinct, and sometimes make difficult decisions and things like that. And I don't know that I would be in a place in my life to actually do that if it weren't for my own menstrual cycle kind of practice, which has actually been far more reaching than just the menstrual cycle. It's everything, isn't it? It's that mind-body connection. But so it kind of it's that sort of chicken and egg type, this cell. Yeah, I don't know how to describe it because I'm on day one, but yeah.
No, I think you did that.
It's clear.
You did it really well. I think you did it really well. Yeah, that gives you that awareness, gives you the capacity to hold the kind of unknownness, and to just kind of to see what happens. I just remembered a bit as well that I forgot to say in the story, that I came to one of your early workshops, Beth, after you'd done Cycle Coach. Do you remember that?
Oh.
Yeah. I'm sure it was to do with parenting. It was like...
And did you come with one of my friends?
I came, and there was a couple of other people, and I came because I was like, who is this very interesting person, and what is she doing? And it was before I think I knew about Cycle Coach, but I hadn't signed up. And I felt a bit bad because I kept asking you questions about it. And I thought, I think she's just trying to facilitate this workshop, Hannah. Just give her a minute.
No,
What about this? What about this? And you were like, it's brilliant, do it. And I was like, okay. So I
love
kind of
it.
followed you. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad it worked out.
Thanks. I don't think I've thanked you for that, so thank you.
Oh, that's my pleasure without even knowing, right? I actually had someone come to a first moon circle a while ago who at the end of the circle, thank goodness she told me at the end that she is doing the first moon circle facilitator training. And I was like, thank you. She said, I didn't know whether to say anything. And I was like, thank you so much for not saying anything. I would have just been a little bundle of nerves.
No, if anything, that should just give you more confidence because she knows exactly what you're going through and doing of holding these spaces. I love this like commonality amongst us of just having to, almost have other people reflect back to us what our strengths are and like finding our footing and finding our confidence in our own stories. And maybe this is a good time to kind of connect to that with working with girls, working with young children who are maybe in this space of broaching a new time of life, broaching puberty and menarche. How did both of your works kind of come into that actuality of like working with kids one-on-one or in group settings?
The first thing that I think I did, I'm just trying to remember now, was, I volunteered to do a workshop with my daughter's class. So when she was in year 6, and I had a good relationship with the head teacher. And I was like, do you want me to come and do a session? And they were like, yeah, brilliant. And I did. And it was brilliant. I was worried that she didn't want me to and she might be embarrassed. She was like, no, that's fine, Mum, you can come. And of course I knew some of the girls in her class anyway. So it just felt like, it didn't feel like work. It just felt like it was brilliant. And I was blown away by how they engaged and how they interacted. And obviously they felt a bit more relaxed because it was, they knew me a bit. But just some of the stuff, I remember just being I felt really moved, like, and I can remember the feeling now of when the teacher was like, yeah, come in. And I was like, oh, okay. I had like a somatic response and then kind of didn't really know what that was about, but was like, okay, let's go for it. And I remember like at the end of this session, the teacher coming back in and one of the students saying to her, she was kind of asking how it had gone. And then one of these students saying, Miss, did you know that like we're the same as the moon, but boys are like the sun? And I was just like just that in itself was just so magic to me. And then, then they invited me to do something else because there was a girl in year 4. So what's that, 9, 10, who had started her periods and the parent was really overwhelmed because it was, young. So I said yeah and went in and did another workshop and they paid me that time. And then on the back of that, I did more workshops, but actually then expanded it out into year 5 and 6. So 10 to kind of 11 and did a similar workshop. So the kind of period products workshop that I do, very experiential. Is that the word, Beth? Experiential? You're the teacher. I don't really know. Playing around with products like red liquid, all the jazz, and I did it with year 5 and 6 girls together. And then I did pretty much the same workshop for year 5 and 6 boys separately. And that was phenomenal because I was nervous because I thought, I don't know how this is going to go. I was so full of, I'm not a teacher. The teacher was going to be there. What if they're really silly? But, they were amazing and incredibly, there was a bit of silliness, but we had a giggle code. So at the beginning, that we could have a bit of a laugh, but just not at anybody else's expense and not kind of in an over the top way. But their curiosity levels were just off the scale to the point where at one point I had to ask them to put their hands down. I was like, should we have a little break from questions? Because they were like, what about this? What about like, and I just thought, wow, this is such a brilliant age to do this, to get to young boys before they get to secondary school and before they're overwhelmed with self-consciousness and before they learn about all of this off the internet or, I just felt really passionate about that age group. And then I had the privilege of doing another workshop. They had quite a lot of trust in me. I think that they were like, well, yeah, we'll just see what happens. But then I managed to do a separate workshop with the year 5s and then a separate one with year 6, but mixing the girls and boys. And I did it on cycle wisdom. So I did like bits of the map, bits of the Jane Hardwick Collins Cycle Coach School map. We didn't go into the life cycle because we didn't have time and I didn't think they'd think that was that relevant. But again, it was especially the year 5s just got it. They just got it because they get seasons. There was a few hilarious bits where it was like, I think we had Jesus in there because I said, like, what do you associate with winter? We had Jesus. I thought, I can't really like not put Jesus up there. Okay. It wasn't really the word that I was imagining would come up. So there were a few little wild cards. Like I think we had volcano in the summer. I mean, okay. Heat. Okay. Yeah.
Passion.
But that was brilliant because they came up and they wrote on the board like the words that they associated. So yeah, that stuff, that kind of evolution of that work in primaries was amazing. And then I've done some stuff in secondaries since then. But that was how it kind of started and how I kind of got the bug, I guess, for working directly with kids.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's wonderful to hear about not only obviously like getting this information to girls, but to boys as well, because every boy, every man will know a woman or a bleeding person. And it's wonderful to have this like destigmatized from the start when they are like at that like age where they're just sponges and their hands are like up in the air because they're so excited to learn more.
I felt really privileged. Yeah.
Particularly with the stuff that you've done with boys is just so interesting and so amazing. And the anecdotes you share about it, like you can really hear the kind of impact. It'll stay with them. It'll stick with them.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope so. I did feel it was a real honor to do it. Yeah.
And then Beth, how is this kind of, so you were teaching teachers, correct?
Yeah. And so I really similar to Hannah, actually, like you just, and I currently I deliver a module, I facilitate a module on the First Moon Circle facilitator training, and I have done for the last few years. And, there's always a lot that comes up because I do this sort of like the lesson plan kind of module, the practicalities and the logistics. And, a lot of people are like, but I've got to get this sorted before I start, and I've got to make sure that this is in place, and I've got to do this. And I just would encourage anyone listening to this who is like wanting to do this work in any way, whether it's with young people, groups, individuals, whatever, that it's never going to be perfect. It's never perfect in teaching. There's always a million and one things you can do. You could do more and more and more and more. It's never perfect. You're dealing every day with human beings who are bringing themselves and everything that's happened to them in the last 24 hours, to you, and so you just can never, ever like predict with 100% certainty or plan for 100% certainty. And it's humans, isn't it? It's human connection, and it's kind of managing that in the moment. And so I think I just had to book a date, basically. I just to book a date for my first circle and just do it. And actually, when you were talking, Hannah, that it's a similar story in the sense that I did my first Moon Circle. I booked the date in. I got my accreditation. It was June 2022 that I ran my first Moon Circle. And when you were talking, Hannah, and it's been very similar in the sense that it's like, you go from one to the next date and then the next day, and then you do something in a school and blah, blah, blah. And it's kind of just evolved from there. Most recently, I was up at a school in London at a primary school last week delivering a session, which is kind of like a sort of signature, I guess, session, although actually all the work that I do with schools is very bespoke, but this is signature in the sense that it covered, menstrual cycle, period products and menstrual cycle awareness. And actually the mums joined for the last half of that session, which was really lovely. And then a few weeks ago, I delivered assemblies to all of the girls in a secondary school, which was about 700 girls. So we split the year groups and I adapted the assemblies accordingly, which was really interesting. So that's kind of, it's gone from booking that first date for that first Moon Circle to now. But what was really interesting to reflect on for me just then was how, there are lots of kind of questions that come up with this work. There's lots of different things that that like themes that emerge a lot with this work. To give you some examples, sustainability with period products, for example, something that is coming up a lot at the moment. I get asked by, the young people that I'm working with, I get asked by their parents and carers. There is ingredients in period products, what's going into them, what impact they have on our bodies. There's always kind of something to consider in it. Another thing that's coming up at the moment is this kind of like, do you power on through when you're on your period, or do you stop everything? And this kind of and when I went into this work, I was so nervous about, what do I think and how would I answer all of those things? And it was, I really hadn't like fully stepped into it. And what I have so realized now, like having been doing it for this, this amount of time, is just, and I'm not saying I've got all the answers and that they're right. I'm still very curious and it will always adapt and evolve, but it's how secure and embodied and assured I feel about what I actually think about these kinds of things that come up, and that I've really considered that, and I've looked at high quality evidence and credible sources and anecdotal observations from my own work that I do. I've really considered that to come up with like an informed kind of approach or opinion about something, and that's just the message that I want to give the young people that I work with, which I go on about all of the time, is it's about being informed. It's about making the right decision for you from a place of being informed. So I really reflected on that journey, and I also reflected on the piece that interests me so much about this work, which of course it's the menstrual cycle and all of the period education stuff like that. I wouldn't do it if I wasn't passionate about it. But actually the bit that I absolutely love, that brings me so much joy with this work, is the pedagogy of it. So we're in a context where we know that period education is actually done increasingly well, and really very well in lots of schools. The schools are full of absolute professionals trying their absolute best with very, very limited capacity and budgets. But the problem is we know how the brain works and learns, and we how the brain learns, and we know that you can't just do something for we'll do the period session once per year and that will be enough. We have to revisit things more often. So for me, going into schools and running first moon circles with 8 to 13-year-olds, I'm always thinking, I've got them for an hour, I've got them for an hour and a half, I've got them for 3 hours. They're not going to remember everything that I told them. I want them to bottle up like a feeling. I want them to feel really safe and excited and powerful. How can I convey that in the time that I've got with them, so that they walk away not necessarily remembering any of the key terms we've talked about, but remembering that feeling when they think about periods again? And how can I set this up, structure this, what activities can we do to transmit as much as I possibly can that will stick, and what can I do throughout the session to check that the understanding. And so it is that real marriage of the pedagogy and the teaching to this work. And I've really been on a journey with that as well, and loved how sort of the structure and the setup and what I do in sessions has evolved over the 3 years too. So yeah, sorry, I've waffled on there.
No, that was so fascinating in terms of what, I just wanted to ask, well, there's about a million things I'd like to ask you about. But the one that has come up for me a bit recently from doing work in schools is about the whole power through thing. So I would love to know what your angle is on that, because the school that I've just done this pilot in, they kind of were concerned, as a lot of schools are, in terms of attendance. So particularly it was year 10 girls, so 15, who they were seeing a real drop off in the attendance.
Oh, Hannah, well, there is lots of surveys and research out there, and funnily enough, we have just worked with the school on an attendance survey, and year 10 girls, top 3 cited reason for being off is the menstrual cycle.
But then what I'm so gripped about is because that's how this came about, this pilot that I've been doing, that I can speak on in a bit, but that they're saying, so they've got all these year 10 girls and said, why aren't you going in? And they said periods, and they were like, well, periods aren't a reason to not go to school. And then you think, oh, that's really tricky in terms of what we know, what we have been taught, what we share in terms of resting at menstruation, and the challenges of doing that in a world that doesn't create that space. So I'm really interested to hear how you would respond to that. What would your approach to a school be, particularly given your background and your knowledge of the educational system, which is...
Yeah, and I mean, attendance is an issue. I don't know that there is, a school out there currently that haven't got attendance as a kid. Well, obviously I don't know that, but I'd be very surprised. Attendance is a nationwide issue, as we know. There's so much to unpick, isn't there? So I think first of all, there's establishing, is there an underlying health here? So first of all, it's good education about what is considered typical and what isn't, what we mean by debilitating symptoms, what is, and the way everyone experiences and perceives pain, for example, is very different. So really unpicking that, working with the student, working with the family, what is going on here. Obviously schools, should be very boundaried, we're not medical professionals, but if there is a need to seek medical interventional support, then again, in the assemblies that I ran with these girls, I did a big bit on, if you spot something that isn't right and you need to speak to a trusted adult, how can you advocate for yourself through an NHS system that we know is, we know that there's a dearth of women's health research. We know that it's really difficult to get a doctor's appointment. We know that you get 10 minutes and, you can often be fobbed off with various different interventions. So how can we really be empowered to advocate for ourselves? So I give lots of top tips about, book a double appointment. If you feel more comfortable with a female GP, you can request that. See if there is a women's health or menstrual health specialist at the surgery, because there might be. Take someone with you if you would like to. Write your questions out. Ask if it's okay to record the conversation. Track your cycle so you go in with data. So when they say, come back in a few months if you're still experiencing it, you can say, well, actually, I've been experiencing it for 6 months. Here's the evidence. All of this stuff to get empowered. So I think where there is a genuine potential underlying health condition, genuine debilitating symptoms, there's a plan. You're working with and supporting and empowering that person to seek support so that their, strategies and support can be put in place. Regard to the suck it up and get on with it attitude and the don't do anything and cancel all plans on your period, I have decided that I am going to take, I'm going to cop out of that one and I'm going to go in the middle. But I have considered it, I promise. So I don't tell young people that I do absolutely tell young people that they should track their cycles, understand how they experience their cycle, that they should absolutely honour their body and rest, etc., etc. But what I do say is that the empowerment bit of tracking your cycle and being connected with your mind and your body is that if you know you're going to be on your period or coming up to your period next week, and that's a time where you feel tired and sensitive and bloated or however, and you've got, let's say, and actually I do multiple choice. I do scenarios and multiple choices for them to, which one would you do? It promotes such discussion. And you've got a netball match coming up, for example, and this is how you're going to potentially feel. What can you do? And one of the options is, sack off the netball match at the last minute, and one of them is power through regardless. And actually, there's no right or wrong. I try to say to them that you don't actually have to do either of those things. Life is full of commitments. We have commitments and we have things that we need to do. And, you have an education at the moment and then you have a job and et cetera, et cetera. So we don't want to just last minute, constantly be saying, oh, by the way, I can't do this, I can't do that. There are commitments that we are part of sports clubs, we've made plans with a friend, whatever. Obviously, sometimes there is a real power in saying no, right? It's really important to know that is there as an option. Actually, we can be so empowered to plan ahead. So there's a middle ground here, and nor do we have to just power through and pretend we're not on our period and that we do need probably more rest at that time, etc., etc. So there is a middle ground where we can do things like tell a trusted adult that we might feel tired and need a rest during the game, and prep that in advance. Make sure that we keep the day before, the evening after, and the day after free. We can have an early night and a nice bath and a hot chocolate and sit and watch a film, and just plan for that so that we can still do the thing, but that we are also honouring our menstrual cycle, how we might be feeling. And I think that's where I've landed, and I've probably swayed the land there over the last few years. How about you, Hannah? And please tell me more about this pilot.
I just love that response. I think it's really clever. Yeah, I agree. But
I think it's a cop-out.
No, but it's not, because you can't just not go to school, can you, for 3, 4, 5 days of the month? You can't.
No.
As much as
the world doesn't start right. It's just not. Yeah.
But
I don't think it has to.
No,
yeah, I don't think it has to.
Even just hearing the two of you speak is healing something within me, because I don't know about you, but when I was in school, I grew up in rural Canada, went to a Catholic high school. So I don't think they talked about anything in high school. I had some sex ed in grade 8. I remember distinctly my first ovulation because I thought that was my period, and then was very surprised when 2 weeks later I was this is the period, this is happening. And then it was just nope, that wasn't it. And so even just hearing the two of you speak, I can already see the impact that this education would have. Because I'm okay, if I was a young girl in school and I knew my period was coming and I knew how to support myself, I was just, even while you're talking, thinking about in high school, I'm I probably would have brought a pillow to sit on. I probably would have brought more snacks. I probably would have all these little things. And just thinking of how if the boys were included in that conversation, the teachers were included in that conversation, there'd just be so much more ease. There would be less fear of going to school and shoving your tampon up your sleeve to go to the bathroom. I did that all the time. It just or the fear of bleeding through your pants, and just that would be the end of the world. So you have to wear like a zip up hoodie on your period so that you had a backup just in case. And just like the awareness, like that menstrual cycle awareness, I know how powerful it was to find as an adult, but to have that given to you or gifted to you as a child to like cross over your menarche and just start from that foundation. I think that alone, like that question around attendance would just be like, of course I can go to school on my period because everyone will know, like, and it's not going to be a bad thing. Like that's my dream world. Obviously, like we're not there yet maybe, but it's just, yeah, I can already see how just the work the two of you are doing will bring about that change. So like the question of like, well, what can we do? You're already doing it from my perspective. And it's going to be like, yeah, they're going to be so much better for it.
Thank you. I think it is the awareness piece, isn't it? And I think I kind of I switch between the two, Beth. On the one hand, I want to say to everybody, lie down. You don't have to do it. But at the same time, yeah, that isn't realistic. But I think that it's the menstrual cycle awareness piece. And when you were just talking, Lauren, about, your experience and remembering that, I was just thinking about my big girl who is going to be 13 next month. And actually some of the things that we do, obviously, is when she's got her period, then I check in and say, are you up to doing PE today? Because if you don't want to, you don't have to do it. And she's like, she'll say if she doesn't want to, and she'll say if she can. And we'll do things like, if she's on day one, we might pick her up from school rather than making her walk back. So I think your middle ground isn't a cop out at all, Beth. It's the both and, isn't it? And I'm hoping that she has that awareness now, because so she can think, I don't have to. It's the feeling like you've got to when you don't want to that causes the challenges, isn't it?
And that support too for like obviously acknowledging girls who might have endometriosis or like actual painful periods. Like I think a lot of my period pain went away when I learned about cyclical living and was able to support and feel my body the way it needed to. But then there are I remember having a client and just like in passing, she mentioned that she was like on cycle day 1 and was in bed and throwing up and all this stuff. And I was like, circle back to that real fast. And just like, so even coming into like your teen years and having that knowledge to be like, what is a normal period, quote unquote, like what is normal pain, and then creating space for that as well to like give them like you said, empower them to speak to their GP and be like, this isn't normal, this experience, and getting that caught so much earlier.
And I guess that's why it is so important, isn't it? Because you're right, Beth, that schools do as good a job as they can with the kind of limited time and the limited resources that they've got from what I can see. But actually, it's a bigger conversation.
Yeah. And of course, attendance is more complex than the menstrual cycle, right? But I do think it's like a part of the jigsaw for sure. I think that is emerging. Sorry, Hannah, I can't.
No. I was just going to say about this pilot that I've just been doing. The reason that I keep mentioning it is because I've just written the evaluation, so it's like fresh in my mind. But it's relevant in terms of the kind of age thing and the kind of I'll tell you a little bit of a background of it. Basically, the Monmouthshire, which is my local authority in South Wales. Wales are really different to England. I don't know, Beth, you know more about the English system, but in Wales we have a period dignity grant, and the Welsh government are pretty hot on period dignity and back that up. So there's a whole period dignity plan. Anyway, they divvy out this money between local authorities, and my local authority gave me a bit of run a pilot for menstrual ambassadors program. So that started the beginning of this year, and I've just written up the pilot, and it was just so incredible, this opportunity. So 4 year 10 girls volunteered to be menstrual ambassadors, and I mean, I've just written the evaluation, but I'm kind of struggling to think about what to say to you about it, because it's just been so many different layers of amazing. But it made me feel so reassured about teenagers, and they get such bad press, and these 4 15-year-old girls would just knock out incredible, just the passion and the tenacity and the courage that they have just shown, like in a really short period of time, pun intended. We managed to put together a workshop. Like I demoed a workshop, the kind of signature period product workshop. They then delivered it back to me and the head of year, really amazingly. And then they delivered it to a group of year 7 girls, and the girls loved it. Of course, because it was, that whole peer-to-peer support thing, and the fact that these girls had lived experience, You know, they were walking the walk and talking the talk, and they were able to say things like, "Oh, well, actually, what I do with my tampon is I do this, or I don't like that applicator, or da 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 da." And it was just so wonderful, and they really enjoyed it. The menstrual ambassadors really enjoyed it, and the year sevens, you could just tell, was so relaxed and engaged and able to ask questions, and it was just wonderful. And then the ideas that these menstrual ambassadors had for their role, they just took on this role. Like, I got them little badges with that are just like a little blood drop. So they've got them next to their like prefect badge and stuff. I don't think it is a prefect badge, but whatever. They're like badged up and they're proud. And I just couldn't believe how like quickly they just got it. And they're like, right, we'll be responsible for making sure that there's products in the toilets, and we're going to do this, and just so energized. And I just really am hoping that we'll be able to roll this out and this become more of a nationwide approach, because it just seems so obvious that that's the way to do it. And then, you know, what I think, and Beth will know more about this than me, but in a lot of schools, they've got well-being ambassadors. And so this, you know, it's not a new concept. And that's fantastic, and that's supporting the well-being of, you know, all of the school. But actually, to have it specifically being menstrual ambassadors, I just think is like quite breaking. It has such potential.
That sounds like an incredible program. So is the vision, as you said, to roll it out nationwide, but to basically train more menstrual ambassadors? So there's a few at each school to then be able to teach and to be that support. Oh, I love that.
Yeah. And I mean, saying rolling it out nationwide, that's being a bit ambitious. I think, you know, I'm hoping we'll start with Monmouthshire. But the concept is like so brilliant, because teachers haven't got the capacity to do it in the way that they want to. And it's really brilliant for upskilling these young people as well, in terms of like work experience, transferable skills, you know, they're volunteering effectively.
I mean, it's been interesting moving to Scotland, and they have free period products everywhere. So that was like a big like step up from where Canada is currently. I mean, obviously different scale of country, so different scale of program. But I could see that being like a logical next step would be like, okay, how do we then get girls in on this at a young age, and boys, to like make it accessible, but also normal, just normal part of our language.
It sounds incredible, Hannah, and we'll have to like talk in more detail about it at, you know, another time, because I think there's potentially some real crossover and overlap and ways that we can work together on that, like the year 10 and the attendance piece. And yeah, it sounds amazing. What were the aims of the pilot? What were you sort of going out to do and tasked to do?
To improve menstrual well-being by challenging the stigma and taboo, really. So I think, you know, that's all. So
And then, yeah,
soft aims.
just tiny remit. And then the menstrual ambassador piece, did you go to the school and discuss ideas with the school, or did you have an idea in your mind already that that's how, like, the framework that you would?
No, so because it was a pilot, I think the bit that we wanted to do to test out was to share menstrual education with year sevens. But what was so wonderful, and kind of it's what I'd hoped, but I didn't know how it would work, you know, as pilots. That's the whole point of them, isn't it? But it was so co-created. So I just said to the young people, this is what we've got this rough idea. What do you think? And kind of handed it over. And so they took real ownership of it. And they came up with all the stuff. You know, I kind of loosely guided them, but it was their idea. And all of it was their idea, really, which was exciting.
And how did that conversation start? Like, so if there's any like facilitators or coaches listening and are like keen to start similar things with town or city, where did that begin? Is it just that you knew about this grant, so you proposed something, or what were the steps?
Yeah, I think I realized very quickly that schools don't have money. And so I think that was one of the barriers at the beginning, actually. Beth, I don't know what you thought about this, but at the beginning I thought, this is not where I'm going to be able to be paid. Like, schools just don't have any money. Like, they have less than no money. It's mad. And that was when I came across, found out about the period dignity grant. But so I guess if you want to be paid to do this, then you have to go elsewhere to get the funding. And I don't know what that, where that funding comes from. Do you get funded from individual schools, Beth, when you go in and do yours?
Yeah, so it's really interesting, the schools piece. And I get asked a lot, how do you get into schools and all of this kind of thing. And I agree with you, Hannah, like, schools have, absolutely no money at all. And also schools, get a huge amount of email traffic of interventions and, different kind of programs and things like that. But of course, schools are the place where you're going to have the most impact potentially. You've got access to, there's so many children, right, that you can go in and I think that's the appeal of them, right? For anyone who's driven to do this work, like we have a passion that we want to share our message and we want as many people as possible to be able to listen to it. And so schools are kind of like a natural place, I think. CIC is me. I'm actually a current teacher, so I'm currently a director of sixth form at a local secondary school to me, and I work 4 days a week. So Thursday is my non-working day where I try to run Bloom and Belong, but I'm so limited, and if I go into other schools it has to always be a Thursday, which obviously limits my capacity hugely. And so the funding piece is something that I have in my head as that needs to be on a strategic plan which exists in my head, and it's not written down anywhere, somewhere maybe in 2028. I know that the charity and the funding sector is very, very challenging at the moment as well. So it's like having any kind of robust system or admin process in place for running my CIC is another thing that is on my in my head as a to do. But really excitingly, because I think that there probably is funding out there if I looked hard enough for it, but I wouldn't even know where to start. But really excitingly, I think I'm on the cusp of taking on a partner for Bloom and Belong, which is super exciting. So I've found someone locally who's just amazing, a lady called Lottie, and we are going to be doing a new programme that I've written called Seasons of Sisterhood together over the next year. Yeah, and if that all goes well, which I'm really confident that it will in terms of our ways of working and working together, then we will, formalise whether it's Bloom and Belong, whether it's we do something new. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it's all TBC. But that obviously will just, double the capacity there and potentially mean that we can explore that route more. But at the moment, yes, schools pay me to go in. But I think the reality is that you do have to be very realistic about what you are going to get paid. And I think that I am in a position where Bloom and Belong at the moment is being very carefully nurtured and incubated to I'm about to turn 40 and I'm how many years can I keep standing up at the front of a class doing this? Probably another 15, I reckon I've got it in me. So, and then I would a more flexible kind of consultancy type period, so I'm sort of nurturing Bloom and Belong, I think, I don't really know, for my pre-retirement, last 10-15 years of work. And so I love my job and I love what I do now, and I wouldn't want to move on from that. So I have to accept that I'm limited in my capacity at the moment. But I have totally lost my train of thought there. I don't know what point I was trying to make at all.
About the fund, I was asking you about the funding and how that.
Thanks, Hannah. I don't even know how that links to the funding, to be honest.
I think you're doing amazingly on day.
No, I've remembered. Thank you. I've remembered that I am paid a salary from my job.
Yeah,
and that pays my bills. And so I am, that is a very privileged position for somebody who is running their own venture, in that I am not relying solely on any income, which I don't think I've ever paid myself from Bloom and Belong. I haven't ever paid myself from Bloom and Belong to pay my bills. So that is a very different scenario to somebody who is running a sole trader partnership, whatever it might be, and needs to generate income. So my advice, if I took the leap and just did Bloom and Belong, I would absolutely not be able to rely just on schools. I would have to think about very carefully, where that revenue, or where the revenue streams were going to be. But what I will say, the other thing I just wanted to say to that very quickly, is that any work that I've ever done in schools has been through word of mouth and personal recommendation. And so I think that, I don't personally, others may have had success from this, and that's great. Personally, I think if you have a blanket email or a PDF thing and you just scatter that out to schools, I don't think that is an effective approach. And I think it is about speaking to the right person in the school. So you want someone on SLT who has responsibility for SHE achievement, well-being, etc., or you want a head of PSHE, and you really getting in some way, whether you're a parent in the school, whether it's about that. And that all of my work with schools has been where it's been, so and so has, and it's become quite third hand now, which is great. It's my mate knows someone whose mate went to, that you just want that ripple effect.
It's a really good point, and I think it's one that I wish I'd known that more. People say to you, networking and word of mouth and all that kind of jazz. But at the beginning, when you start off, this was my experience anyway, you think, I've just got to go on Instagram and talk about it, and then hundreds of people are going to flock my way. And then it takes you a while to go, that's actually, it's not. But you have to kind of like test it out. Like you kind of work that out yourself, I think.
Oh, and that is, social media has such a love-hate. I've got about 6,500 followers on TikTok. I don't think I've ever had any business from TikTok, but I mean, I don't. I mean, I don't think anyone has ever come to a circle or done. And then Instagram, I think probably 3 people see what I ever put, and I'm so up and down with it. I'm not consistent, but I think
I'm one of the 3.
Thanks, Hannah, and likewise. But I think it is about accepting that it takes time. It really takes time, and taking every opportunity that's come your way. I mean, I was recently interviewed. Someone reached out to me. I've got a double page spread at the moment in the locals, like where people advertise, their small businesses, and there's like a double page spread with a great big crochet vulva, and it's absolutely amazing, and I have no idea if that's going to have any impact whatsoever. But it's just little and often, and you do build up credibility, you do build up a reputation in your area, but it takes, this is a very divisive, very difficult, uncomfortable space for some people, and this is a niche message, and so when you put yourself out there, it's just keeping going with it and just knowing that it will take time, but you absolutely will get there.
I think that's a really good point. And when you were saying that, it was just making me think about how it takes time, and that's why it's so important to have a backup as well. Like, I left my job over a year ago, and I'm still like, after 20 years of employment. But I did most of the kind of building. I don't think I've finished that, but I started the kind of foundational bit whilst having a part-time job, because I don't think it's possible to not do that.
What was the tipping point? Because we spoke, I think, around the time that you decided to leave work. And what would you say was that tipping point for you where you knew this has been bubbling away, now it's time?
I think that's a really good question. I really appreciate you asking me that, because it's just jumped it back into my head that it was my old boss, who I like a lot and have a lot of respect for, asked me to do something and I didn't want to do it. And I had a full body, no, you can't, which was ridiculous. But I think it's that once you've had that experience of freedom and the autonomy and having that agency to do what you want to do, it's quite hard to then go back to going, yes, I'll do that. That was the tipping point. And I just thought, oh my, I'm just going to have my notice in. Bonkers, really. It was a big financial risk. And I had a buffer, like I didn't, full transparency, I didn't just segue neatly into full-time freelance work. And I still do bits of social work as well. As a proud social worker. So it's never as clear-cut as they make out, is it?
No. Beth, we're an hour in. We've been chatting for a long time, and I still want to get to congratulations on your Master's of Science from Oxford.
Good morning.
And I wanted to hear about this amazing dissertation, which I did write the title down if you want me to read it, or you can talk about it.
But I can remember it. No, go on, you say it. They definitely started periods in pedagogy, which I was so proud of. All 2 years, I was like, yes, that's an amazing title.
Yes, periods in pedagogy. Pedagogy? How do you guys say it?
You can say pedagogy, you can say pedagogy. I personally say pedagogy.
Periods in pedagogy, the impact of menstrual cycle on teachers' emotions and the effectiveness of a coaching intervention. Powerful title and subtitle. How did this dissertation come about? How did you feel writing it, publishing it?
Wow. So this master's was nothing to do with periods. I wanted so it's an MSc in teacher education. So it's quite a niche master's that the University of Oxford have developed and run that is kind of designed for those that are involved in educating teachers. And at the time that I signed up for it, I had worked for 5 years for Teach First, who are an initial teacher training provider in the UK. They're a large ITT provider, and I was training teachers. And I'd had the girls. I was feeling, I'd worked part-time in roles I hadn't particularly enjoyed for a while, and I was feeling like I always knew I wanted to go back into the classroom. I was waiting for something appropriate to come up locally. I was like, I'm feeling ready to just take on a bit more challenge myself. I didn't want to do like an educational sort of leadership you can do education leadership type masters. I wanted to do something really focused on this idea of educating teachers. So I've signed up for the course. I did the first year, which was so fascinating, and it was part-time. So I was spending some time in Oxford and doing it whilst I put Bluey on for 20 minutes and be like, oh, what can I get done in 20 minutes? And the first year was brilliant. 3 assignments in the first year, and they were focused on teachers' beliefs, teachers' knowledge, and the last one was focused on like designing teacher education sessions. So we looked at really interesting concepts and theories around how you can design a session basically and get the most out of it, or teachers can get the most out of it. And so I'd done that, and there was nothing about periods at all in any of that. And then it was time for the second year, and they said, right, you've got to come up with a title for your dissertation. And we were talking, and again, I hadn't really thought about periods at this point, and I suddenly, I don't know when it was, I went in the August for a residential week. And I think I was chatting to somebody, and they all got really close as a cohort. It was lovely. And someone had followed me on Instagram and was talking to me about the period work. And I was increasingly kind of coming back into the classroom, noticing that, the impact of the menstrual cycle on my own practice. And again, like being so empowered to plan for that, I'm going to be on my period next week. Right. What am I doing in the classroom next week to support myself there? Not in a lowering standards kind of way, but in a like, how am I tweaking? How am I adapting? What am I choosing to do in the classroom next week to really support myself? And I thought, I feel like there's a missing trick here. And I feel like not just for teachers, but in their own practice, women and menstruating teachers, but also for all teachers, because we are teaching, if you're a secondary teacher and a primary teacher, you are teaching children who are going to have menstrual cycles or be connected to in some way people that haven't. And it felt like a real missing trick. I was thinking of those kind of scenarios where you've got a teacher and a 14-year-old year 9 who's gone into a lesson late because they had to change their period product and is feeling really sensitive about that, and the teachers, you're late, and you get in. And how would that bit of awareness and education and empathy and just taking us help that like behavior management type situation? So I thought, well, there's no way that the University of Oxford are going to let me write about periods. Like, that's just not going to happen. But my supervisor, Anne, she's the department director, and she is absolutely, Anne Childs, big shout out to Anne Childs, she's just amazing. And she was my supervisor, and I said to her, can I marry my two worlds here and look at the impact of periods? And she was so supportive and so on board right from the get-go. And it's really her encouragement, because it was unwieldy, it was totally overwhelming to start with. I didn't know that I was going to focus on emotions. I was focusing on teaching. I just had, it was an exploratory kind of phenomenological, if I can pronounce that word, and I couldn't grasp the threat. I couldn't visualize in my mind like how I was going to make it work. So I got going. There are 3 teachers at my school that signed up who are just amazing and did the sort of semi-structured interviews. And what I found out was just, it's just incredible. I had people saying to me, some of these women were saying to me that they felt that they probably were on reflection quicker to set detentions in the premenstrual phase because that resilience and that, was down. And, there's no judgment there like that, that that's a really vulnerable share, isn't it? And a really open share for them to disclose to me. And there's absolutely no judgment. It's like, wow, within that, there's so much we could potentially work with. So I think it became apparent from there that there was like an emotions focus. So I reviewed all the literature on teacher emotions, which is so interesting. And I will not go on and on trying to be really concise, but there's bits there about how teachers, well, first of all, I spent about 2 months trying to define what the word emotion meant, but that was by the by. We'll gloss over that bit. But the teachers are managing, it's such a human profession, isn't it? And you're managing your emotions and the emotions of your students, what they bring to the classroom all the time. And there are a number of strategies that teachers use to do that. So there are like antecedent-based strategies, things you might put in place before, like knowing that you are going in feeling tired or frustrated or whatever, and then like in the moment strategies to deal with the situation. It was just so interesting. So then I reviewed all of the sort of coaching literature, and I developed this coaching program which involved an element of education. So I ran a bit of a menstrual cycle in a session with the teachers, introduced them to the concept, and then there was some coaching in between, and I sort of based it all on a particular coaching model in education. And then we came back and we had a focus group with them all at the end, and then I did final interviews with them all as well. And wow, were really interesting impacts. So one of them who had come in perhaps more open to the idea of the menstrual cycle and menstrual cycle awareness impacting their role. She was the head of department, and she had, for the year ahead, marked on her team departmental calendar when her period was, and had thought about her longer term planning and marking load to be managed around that, and was discussing it, with her team. I just thought that was just amazing. Sorry, I've been using so many hand gestures. I just knocked my phone off. I've literally moved the air. And then impacts for one of the women coming in, like, really, was quite, she was not so, she was like, you just get on with it. Like, my menstrual cycle doesn't impact the way that I do things. Like, you just get on with it. And actually she had some really quite changes in her belief around that. And they just all shared some like beautiful anecdotes and things that had happened and ways that they'd handled situations differently based on going through the coaching. And so that was amazing. So then I'm ended with a number of recommendations to the teacher education sector. So if anyone is interested in reading it, it is on my website, summary, not the whole 20,000 words, obviously, but there is a summary on my website that I was asked to write for a little journal review thing. And you can find that on my website if anyone's interested.
And I just love this viewpoint because, as we talked about before, like the power of having menstrual cycle awareness as a teenage girl and entering menarche with that knowledge. But then also flipping the perspective to the teacher of just like, I think of myself as a coach. And now that I have this menstrual cycle awareness, I see my friends differently. I see all the women in my life differently, because whether you're doing cycle check-ins or not, there is a bit of intuition of like, I think this is where this person is in their cycle. So I imagine, like, obviously I'm not a teacher teaching children, but being able to be in a classroom and seeing, the girls in your class show up differently over their cycles, and being able to have compassion for not only yourself, but then for the kids in your classroom. There is that duality that I think is, you guys are going to just change the world one school at a time. It's absolutely brilliant.
The biggest thing that's come out of today for me is the blood drop badges, like that.
Well, so the really annoying thing about that is the place I got them from on Etsy, Beth, have now run out, like before, and then I've contacted them and I haven't heard. So you've just reminded me I've got to get onto them again. Who knows if anywhere else, get in touch.
That's just amazing.
Yeah, the two of you are absolutely incredible. And we've gone way over our time because we were chatting before we hit record. But before we wrap up, is there anything else that you would love to share about like the work that you do, or any final questions you might have for each other too?
God, it just feels like there's so much that we could talk about, isn't there? And Hannah, I definitely want to talk about your pilot and Year 10 girls.
Yeah, we'll book a date in.
Really
and also, I want to know more about your girls group, because I'm running a girls group too.
There we go. Yes, and that's what, because you talked about that last time, and do you remember we talked about potentially like they're linking up and there being scope for that? So I've now planned the curriculum sort of over, it's a year-long, seasons of sisterhood, so year-long journey, for 10 to 12-year-old girls, right at that secondary transition. And yours is similar, isn't it? Is it similar age group?
It's so interesting. Yeah. So we've established that Beth and I need to have another meeting.
I have established that.
And I think there's so much more that we could say, but I think we've kind of covered the main bits of what you and I are doing, Beth, haven't we? But I just think I just feel really privileged to do it. So it doesn't really feel like work. You know that?
It never ever feels
doesn't
like work.
feel like work. So when people say, "Oh, it sounds like you're doing really good work," I think, well, it doesn't feel like work. But I feel just really honoured and privileged to have the opportunity to hang out with these amazing young people, and really reassured and hopeful. Actually, I feel much, much more hopeful than I did about the potential of changing the narrative.
And what final pieces of advice would you have for any coaches or facilitators who already are able to work with girls? So it's not necessarily about getting into school, but if they want to hold these spaces for girls, what would your advice be to them?
Book the date.
Book the date.
You're never going to feel ready.
You're never going to feel ready. Book the date. I think, and I think I would just say as well about the creating safety, that like in order to create safety in a group, you have to be really conscious and aware of the safety within yourself. So the kind of nervous system piece is really key, and that just go for it. Like if you've wanted to do it, just go for it. And also just go for it. Like just contact a school and say, can I come in? And just, maybe don't charge, just because all of that is really brilliant experience and will enable you to grow, or will enable you to decide if that's what you want to do or not. Because we don't know what we want to do till we know what we don't want to. You know what you don't want to do till you try it out. So I guess it's like a suck it and see from a regulated place, if that makes sense.
Yes, and I think as well, like you do not have to be a teacher to do this work with young people in any way, shape or form. Like you need to have a passion for wanting to empower and inform and educate young people about this and, enjoy working with those age groups, right? Like, they're curious and they're hilarious. Just so, just amazing. Those two things, like that passion to share and educate and, just enjoying working with groups of young people is absolutely enough for sure. I think I would feel remiss to not say, oh, sorry, this is the teacher in me. If you are working with groups of young people, and this will potentially vary depending on where you are, but it is important to have things like safeguarding processes, procedures, training in place, and the appropriate kind of DBS for us. It's the disclosure barring service, so police check, an enhanced police check, so that you adds credibility. And I just think that all of that stuff is so essential if you're working with young people. So just upskill and be clued up about that and make sure that that's all in place.
Sounded from both of you. So thank you so much. One final question. Where can people find you and connect with the work that you do?
Well, I'm Bloom and Belong, CIC, and the website is www.bloomandbelong.co.uk. And then I'm on Instagram, TikTok and Facebook as Bloom and Belong.
Amazing. And Hannah?
I'm Womb Wisdom, and on Instagram, womb__wisdom, but also my website is wombwisdom.uk. So you can find me there. And I do one-to-one cycle coaching and cyclical supervision as well for professionals.
Amazing. Thank you both so much for carving out such a chunk of your day.
Thank you so much, Laura.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Cycle Coach Show. If you loved what you heard, then please review, share, and subscribe to help us reach more cyclical listeners like you. You can find us on Instagram at Cycle Coach School or online at cyclecoachtraining.com.